All right, now it is time to make my updated Oblivion Remastered race tier list. So I'm going to put these in alphabetical order, and we're just going to start right away with Argonian. And if we go to the races here, this is on the UESP. It's got the list of all their attributes, their skill bonuses, and more information. So if I look at Argonians, they have bonuses to agility and speed. They lose endurance, willpower and personality, or just endurance and personality. Losing the endurance isn't as bad as it was in classic Oblivion because of the way endurance is now retroactively giving you more health. These are their skill bonuses. Nothing too great. I mean, hand-to-hand and mysticism's pretty mediocre. The bonuses to alchemy at the beginning aren't very valuable, but I will say bonuses to skills are not super valuable early game because early game they're very, very easy to raise. So if this was plus 10 athletics going from 90 to 100, that would be valuable. But going from 5 to 15, not so great. Even if you pick it as a major skill and you specialize in combat, the highest you can start is 40 in any skill. So if you've played the remastered, you've noticed going from 5 to 40 doesn't take that long, so these bonuses aren't that important. To highlight what I mean, I'm going to compare the starting skills and attributes of a Breton to a Nord. So in this specific case, I'm talking about Blade because a Nord receives plus 10 to Blade and has 10 more strength than a Breton, assuming you pick the male version of the Breton. So the Breton has 40 strength, the Nord is 50, and the Nord starts with plus 10 Blade. The Breton starts with plus 10 to things like Conjuration and Restoration, so different spell schools. Blade, every swing gives you 0.6 experience in the remaster. Before the remaster in Classic Oblivion, it was only 0.5. They buffed it a little bit. I'm assuming because weapons are a little bit slower. I believe blunt is 0.7 experience per swing. Assuming the formulas are the same, you get a bonus experience per swing if you choose it as a major skill and if you choose combat spec. This is using those same formulas. You know, it could be slightly different, but for my playing so far, it seems to be about the same. For example, to get from level 5 to 6, you need to swing only 2.16 times. So a third swing will gain you a level. But as you get to higher levels here, the last level needs 191 swings to gain a single skill point from 91 to 100. And that's assuming that you chose it as a major and you specialize in combat. It would take over 400 swings if you didn't do that. And this equation here, it's kind of weird. This is just how much experience each skill needs to get to the next level. And that's just the formula that they use. And then each skill gives a different amount of experience. And then they have multipliers based on whether or not you specialize in it as a major or you specialize in terms of combat, magic, or thief. Okay, so Breton start at 30 Blade. Nords start at 40. To get from 30 to 40, a Breton would need to attack 394 times to catch up to a Nord. So it's not totally worthless. At the same time, it's not that slow. After 2,000 swings, a Breton would be level 61 Blade, and a Nord would be 65. So that gap, as you get higher levels, starts to close because you need a lot of swings. And so that difference of 394 swings, as you can tell just by adding these together, towards the end, that's only 1 or 2 points. So it's not going to be that different as you get further along. A Breton needs 7,300 swings to get to level 100. A Nord needs about 6,900. So to get from 30 to 100 or 40 to 100, it's not that different. It is different. So there's some meaning to this, but it's not going to change the game dramatically. So looking at the damage formulas, a Breton, we're going to start talking about an Iron Longsword as a Breton who maybe they picked strength as a favorite attribute and they majored in Blade and they chose combat specialization. They would rounded to about 3.17 damage. Well, a Nord doing the same thing would have 55 strength and 40 Blade, so they would do 4.1. I put these here just kind of highlight the difference. At the very beginning, coming out of the sewers, assuming you haven't gained any Blade skill yet, and you haven't gained a level, and you're using an Iron Longsword, a Nord is doing 29% more damage than a Breton. So at the very beginning, your race does make a big difference. But if you've played this game, you know that the very, very beginning is pretty easy, especially if you're playing on Adept, and most of my information is about Adept. Now, I know for whatever reason, a lot of people really like Master difficulty. In Classic Oblivion, max difficulty was not popular, and it's certainly not a very fun way to play. If you've played the game for thousands or, well, really hundreds of hours and you're bored of it, it's a good thing to try. But if you've never played Oblivion in the past decade, I highly recommend you just play Adept, get to high level, try it out, because with the level scaling, the enemies will become more difficult and it will feel good to blow them up and one-shot them. And so you want to get that feeling. I think my strategy is when I'm fighting a boss, like when I fight Manny Marco, when I fight Jigaleg, when I fight Mankar Cameron, I will turn it to Master so I really have that fear for those boss fights. But general playthrough, I'm going to keep it at Adept because I think that's what's most fun. At level 11, a Breton is only going to have 10 less strength. This is assuming you put +4 into strength every level. So you're splitting it between 3 attributes. Assuming you're some kind of spell sword or battle mage or a character who cares about their blade damage, you'd put at least 4 into strength every level. I think that's totally reasonable. So you'd have +40 to 3 different attributes. A Breton will have 85 strength and Nord would have 95. Here's their blade difference, 61 and 64. The difference, the percent difference is much lower. As you can see, it's 1 more damage for the Nord. So there is still value in being a Nord. A Nord will do more than a Breton at this point in the game, about 8%. But as you keep playing very quickly, before level 21, they're only 4 levels away. By level 15, we're going to have 100 strength, even as a Breton. Probably by level 21, you would have 100 blade on either character. It wouldn't make a difference. And at that point, there is functionally no difference. It's just your Breton has 50% magic resist, and your Nord only has 50% frost resist. And so that's why really these skills and attributes, they even out by the end. And the end is when the game gets difficult due to the level scaling. And because of that, I'm really talking about the traits the most. On Master difficulty, this stuff matters more because you need to get past level 1. You need to get past level 11. The beginning is difficult on Master. So most of my tier lists are talking about Adept. A lot of people commented on my major skills tier list, hey, why isn't Conjuration S? Because it ignores difficulty. Well, of course, Conjuration's the best for Master difficulty because it ignores difficulty. It's almost like a glitch to me. It's like it feels like I'm cheating using it. Conjuration and poisons on Master difficulty because it ignores the ×5 multipliers. But whatever, that's a different topic. Back to this. So this is if you have +10 destruction. So I believe Dark Elves and High Elves have +10 destruction. So if we pick Dark Elf here, they have +10 destruction. So a Dark Elf, compared to somebody who doesn't have +10 destruction, like Nord, for example, well, they will have their spells will be cheaper because you start with 30 skill. 20 shock damage would cost 37.5 at 30 skill, but the Dark Elf, it would cost 33. Now that's not a very dramatic difference, but it is different. So just like with the Nords and the Bretons using blades, having a lower spell school skill will change that multiplier. The difference between 30 and 40 is 1.04 and 0.92. And sadly, by the end, when we're at like 95, the difference is only going to be like 95 to 97, so not very different. Those last 10 points of destruction are very valuable because you're going from 0.32 to 0.2. It's like more than a 50% reduction, so it's a huge difference, but it's not like you get that +10 late game. You get it right at the beginning. So those racial bonuses of attributes and skills, I'm going to count them as very minor. They do make a difference, and if you're doing a Master playthrough, they matter a little bit more, so that would obviously alter my tier list. But this is assuming we're doing Adept difficulty, where the game only really has any challenge for bosses or at higher levels. Mostly we're going to be looking at traits and greater powers. And Argonians resist disease 75%, which isn't worthless, but I will say I don't value that very high because disease can be dealt with by the time diseases are actually very damaging. Like there's astral vapors, which gives you stunted magicka. You have a way to deal with them. You either have potions, you can carry mandrake roots, or you have a spell. With 50 restoration, you can just cast Cure Disease, and then it's completely negated, and this is worthless. Resist poison 100%. When I first made my race tier list, I actually valued this very low, but after doing the Shivering Isles, I will say this is much higher than I originally thought. Water breathing, I think, is basically worthless. You can get for free, if you're joining the Mages Guild, they give you a free water breathing spell, and you only need 25 alteration. I think this is almost entirely worthless. I would never pick it for the water breathing. But with that resist poison, I think that bumps them up to C, because they are the only race that has immunity to poison, and that could be useful. Next, we have Bretons. I don't know why this art is so weird. It's like, really? This is a typical male Breton? Whatever. They are the mages, though. They have bonuses to intelligence and willpower to start, and they lose other attributes. Either way you go, you pick the male or female, whatever you call them, the background. The one on the left will always be male. The one on the right is female. I don't know the names of all of them. I'm not going to remember them. Here's their skill bonuses. Obviously, they start with bonuses to magic like restoration and conjuration. But the big thing for them is their traits are they resist magic 50%, which is massive. 50% magic resist means you're taking half damage from magic, and all you need for magic immunity is the mundane ring. And if you've ever played late game Oblivion, you know magic damage is really what's hurting you. Nothing else is really doing that much to you. Fortify Magic of 50 is a little bit worse than it was in Classic Oblivion because now a Fortifying Magicka doesn't increase your Magicka regen. And that is a big change. However, it's still pretty good. It doesn't hurt to have 50 extra Magicka. You can cast more spells before you have to rest or before you have to do something different. Lastly, they have this Greater Power Dragon skin. It's once a day they can get 50% shield for 60 seconds. And that is a great way to pull a lot of enemies early game to level heavy armor and block. You have a minute where you can probably get to the armor cap. If you're at 35% armor, that alone is enough to get to that 85 armor cap, making you basically indestructible early game. It's huge. It's a big bonus, 50%, especially for guys that don't have a lot of endurance and they only have that magic resist. So they're very tanky. They're the tankiest race, and I think that allows them to really focus on intelligence and willpower attributes or their skills that allow them to do more damage, and they don't need to worry as much about their defenses. Because of that, I'm going to put Breton at S tier. They are really good. Very powerful. Okay, next we have the Dark Elf. They only get bonuses to speed. The male version just loses out on personality instead of endurance. You should always pick that one unless you're role-playing. They're probably my favorite bonuses to skills. Blade, Destruction, Athletics. Very cool. They have 75% resist fire, which is a massive bonus to fire. And there's a lot of traps that deal fire damage. Now, resist fire does not protect you from lava, but you need very little to get to immunity to fire, and you probably don't even need to do it. And they have a Summon Ancestor Guardian, which can be decent, but that's once a day as a greater power. And really, unless you're playing on Master difficulty, I don't think this summon is very good. On Master difficulty, summons ignore the difficulty, so it could be valuable, but you could just get a different summon pretty early game. So really, all we're looking at here is this 75 fire resist. And honestly, compared to resisting disease and poison, it's massive. So I'm going to put them in A tier. And they look cool, so that might make me a little biased as well. And I like Morrowind. Okay, now we have High Elves, the Altmer. If you've played a lot of Skyrim, you probably hate the Altmer, and that's fair. But in Oblivion, they're not so lame. They get a massive 100 Fortify Magicka. Again, though, this does not change their Magicka regen. And so I think this actually nerfs them quite a bit from what they were in Classic. In Classic, I think if you wanted to be the most powerful character, you pretty much had to pick a Breton or a High Elf. Because magic is so useful and versatile and powerful in this game that you can't just ignore it and become a very powerful character. They also have Resist Disease, 75%. I've already talked about how it's not very worthwhile. And they get 25% weakness to all elements. And early game, that's not a big deal, and late game, you have ways to deal with it, but it is a weakness. It's definitely there, and you will notice it, especially if you're playing on higher difficulties, or if you do something like pick the Apprentice Birth Sign. Lastly, the High Elves had a height of 1.1 in Classic Oblivion. Now, all races are the same height. So they actually move the same speed as everybody else. This was a massive boost to them. In fact, there's another race that used to move at 0.9, and now they got a lot taller, the Todd Howards of the world. And that's definitely going to change this tier list. I had them in S, and you could still argue that they are S, but I'm going to put them at the highest A tier. Because honestly, if they're moving the same speed as everybody, it's only if you really, really want that 100 Magicka. If you really want to play a mage, and you really want to be a magic-focused character, yes, Altmer are the best. Of course, that puts them in A tier for the mage build. If you're not really focused on a magic build, they have the same Magicka regen as anybody else with willpower. So if you're not planning on having huge nukes, you don't need to pick an Altmer. So I think they've been nerfed quite a bit. Still great though. Still very powerful. Obviously A tier is great. Imperials, oof. They get plus to personality, which is kind of embarrassing, and plus to mercantile and speechcraft. I think these skills are just overall pretty bad. Heavy armor, getting a bonus to that is fine. They're greater powers. So they have 2 greater powers, which means you can use them once a day. Absorb fatigue, 100 points on touch. I don't really see a use for that. The thing with greater powers is they're great if they're oh crap buttons. Heal 200, that's good. Charm, that's actually good because you don't need to charm repeatedly. You just do it once and then you get what you need with that Voice of the Emperor. So it's actually pretty good. But absorb fatigue is the kind of thing, do I need it when I'm fighting or do I not? There's not very many difficult boss fights, and I know the remaster kind of buffed bosses. This isn't powerful enough. It's not like 50% shield or some of the other greater powers. It's absorb 100 fatigue. There is, you could say, oh, but I'm doing a hand-to-hand build, and so maybe you have some crazy build But honestly, I would put these guys in the D tier. I think they're the worst, one of the worst races right now. I will say, and I should have said this at the beginning, these are marginal differences. You should pick the race that you like. So I know you might be thinking, I love Imperials, and you just put them in D tier. Before you leave an angry comment, seriously, pick the race you like. The S plus tier is the race that you like the most. These differences, compared to the birth signs even, are very marginal. And with the way they changed the leveling system, even the major skills, the differences are more marginal. These are less important than they used to be. Pick the race you like. That is S+. But objectively, Imperials kind of suck now. Khajiit. Okay, that's next. They gain agility and lose willpower or endurance. Plus 10 to acrobatics is fun. I like it. Plus 10 to hand is kind of worthless. Demoralize is actually pretty interesting. This is a very expensive spell. I think it's got like a 600 base cost. And it always works, even if you're wearing armor. So normally Demoralize, level 25, so 100 points, will not work if you have 95 spell effectiveness at high levels. But with 100% spell effectiveness, which you always have with greater powers, this spell will actually always work. So you can demoralize people at any time. They also have a free Night Eye, which I just think is kind of worthless. In my other video, I talked up this Demoralize because it is cool, but this is their only thing that they get for their race, really, that has any meaningful value. You might think, but plus 10 agility, but that's not that great. There are better archers, sadly. I don't think they should be. And I love Khajiit, and I think they're super cool. And that's actually going to bump them up because maybe without that, they would probably be the worst. But I think that's going to put them in the high D tier because they are not, nothing here is very good. These powers, these traits are just not very worthwhile. So I love these guys. I love the cats. I'm so glad they're in the game, but it's just not that interesting. I think these things need a little bit of a buff. Skyrim did a good job. Instead of just giving them a base increase to hand, they actually deal more damage. If they had some kind of bonus to hand that you couldn't get just by leveling your hand 10 times, so every other race can get that, then I think Khajiit would be worth it, but they didn't, so this is what we got. Next we have Nords. Handsome. The best people out there. The tall, handsome Chads, the Giga Chads, strength and endurance. It's all you really need. Who needs to be smart or personable when you're a Giga Chad? They have bonuses to blade, blunt, and heavy armor, which is like the best skills to start with. It's so much fun to start with high blunt and high heavy armor and high armor and block. These guys early game, just because of these skill bonuses, can be a beast, and it is very fun. If you're playing master difficulty, I actually do like picking Nords quite a bit. They have this frost damage, 50 points. They'll understand that's only 10 points on master, so it's not as crazy as you might think, but it is very good. Their woad is not as good as a Breton's, but 30% shield for a minute is still a great oh crap button. And again, compared to a Breton, resist frost is nowhere near as good as resist magic. But they're not meant to be the mage. They're not meant to be like a Breton. They're meant to be the big, beefy warrior. So with that said, I think they're objectively worse than Breton. And because they have a different race that I can say is objectively better than them, they're going to have to go in B tier. They're great warriors. They're awesome. They're tons of fun. I highly recommend trying a Nord just so you can experience the Nordic Frost and how powerful they are early game and the role playing. You can be this Giga Chad. That's always great. Fact is, nothing here is that great. So it's just outclassed by other races. I love them though anyway, so I'll play Nords a lot. Next we have Orcs. Orcs are interesting. So they have lots of different attribute changes because they're one of the only ones with they are the only ones with these +5 changes. Not that important though. These, minus 15 personality from the females on Classic Oblivion I thought was great because it allowed me, you have +20 to these attributes that you actually care about. And that's pretty cool. But now with the new leveling changes, I'm less worried about that. Similar to Nords, they're +10 armor, heavy armor, block, and blunt. You can use all 4 of those skills. So you can have 4 skills starting at level 40 that are part of a very specific build. Block, blunt, heavy armor, armor. That is very rare where a race lines up like that, and so Orcs are really cool because a lot of them will have blade and blunt. You pick one, and so those skills are kind of not, like if I look at Redguard quick, they have blade, blunt, and athletics. They have light armor and heavy armor. You're not using both of those, you're picking and choosing from those, where these just all line up where all your +10s, you can just pick them. They also have this Berserk ability, Fortify Fatigue 200, Fortify Strength 50, Fortify Health 20. This is once a day, 60 seconds. Now, in the Classic Oblivion, Fortify Fatigue didn't increase your maximum fatigue, it only increased your current fatigue in the damage calculation. And so fortifying your fatigue 200 points gave you a big boost to damage. However, in the remaster, it's still really valuable because with that much fatigue, you can get a lot of power attacks in. You can sprint a lot. 200 is quite a bit. Though draining your agility will lower your fatigue a little bit and lower your fatigue regen. I think that's okay. Fortifying strength, early game will get you up to that 100 basically right away. So your strength multiplier for damage will be maxed out. Early game, I think this is great. And by late game, because you're draining that much agility, I think it's not as good. But that's okay. It's fun. It unlocks Fortify attribute, Fortify health, Fortify fatigue, and drain attribute right away at spellmaking, which is cool. This is really the only reason orcs are pretty good. Resist magic 25% is a big resistance. It is more than 50% frost. I would say it's comparable to the Dark Elves 75% fire resist. It's spread out. It also helps you against paralyze. It also helps you against silence. It's just a big boost. And so if you don't want to play a Breton, that's a great way to start with some magic resist. So I will actually put them in A tier. Orcs are awesome. Next we have the Redguard. The Redguard. So they have good attribute bonuses, but again, those don't matter as much. You know, you're like, ooh, minus personality. Perfect. Plus strength and endurance. I start with a lot of health. I start with a lot of carry weight. Plus 10 to my weapon skill is always fun. Plus 10 to athletics. You know, these guys can come out of the sewers as one of the fastest guys. Adrenaline rush is their greater power. It fortifies your agility and your strength. So it doesn't matter which one you're doing, whether you're using a bow or whatever, or a dagger. It's always going to help you. Speed 50 points, endurance 50 points, and health. However, 50 strength and 50 endurance, that's 100 points. That's 100 health. Combine that with this 25 health. This is 125 health. This is kind of the oh crap thing. I'm going to stay alive for a long time by using this, which is pretty useful for a greater power. You also move 50 speed faster, which can be useful. Just be careful. If it ends and you're below 125 health, you just die. You're going to lose that health when these go away. That's okay. And having a fortified strength 50 points, just like Berserk, I didn't mention this, but that can be a minute of extra carry weight, which can get you to where you want to go. That's 250 carry weight. I know now in the remaster you can move really slowly, but this can get you through that point. And you can fast travel. So you can use this and fast travel, drop your stuff in town, go sell stuff, and go pick it up, which can be nice. Resist disease, 75% I think is not very useful, and resist poison, 75% is not very useful. So unlike the orc, they don't have that 25% magic resist. I think both of these combined is much weaker than 25% magic resist. I think Adrenaline Rush is a little bit better than Berserk, but I think they lose out to the Orc. And because there's great warriors, the Orc and the Nord, I think that puts the Redguard in either the B or the C tier. I'm going to put them in the C tier because there's better warriors. Objectively, they're probably better than Argonians if you're playing a warrior, but the fact is, if I'm going to play a warrior, I'm picking one of these 5 races above a Redguard. Honestly, any of them would be better. So Redguards are good. They're not great. And just because you can only pick one, they're going in C tier. Next, we have Wood Elves. Now, if you've been watching my channel, you know I have a problem with Wood Elves. We go way back. I've never liked Gainor. I've never liked Glarthir. I have a lot of problems with Umbra. We've had our differences. But I think they're starting to come around. And that is because, and only for one reason, they used to be short. They used to have a 0.9 multiplier to their speed. And Altmer used to have a 1.1 times multiplier to their speed, meaning High Elves were more than 22% faster than Wood Elves. High Elves had a 10% speed reduction. Wood Elves had a 10% speed increase. And now, starting with 50 speed, kind of like these Dark Elves, starts them as one of the faster races. Argonians, male Argonians, Dark Elves, and Wood Elves. And they also have 50 agility. So if you want to be an archer or want to be some kind of stealth character who's fast and has a lot of agility and you're getting those up right away, Wood Elves can do it pretty quick. With that said, they only have 30 strength, which is annoying. Not a fan of that. And their traits still kind of suck. Beast Tongue, command creature up to level 5. That's just too low level. The fact is, beasts are really easy early game, and it's not until they are above level 5 where you think, oh, this bear is really powerful. I wish I could command it. But you can't because it's only up to level 5. It's basically a worthless power unless you're playing on master difficulty right at the beginning of the game and you're using it on rats. And then they have resist disease, which I've already talked about as not being very valuable. While they might move 10% faster, they start out as a really great stealth archer, which can be really nice. Those aren't so difficult to level. And so even though they'd be great early game, they'd seem by mid-game where the game starts to get actually more difficult, it's just kind of a waste. They don't have any good traits. And because of that, they're also going to go in C tier. You know, you could argue that Redguards could move up to B tier. I think that'd be pretty reasonable, and honestly, that makes my tier list look a little neater. So we're going to do that. You know, and again, all of these are marginal. You're not going to have a hard time if you pick a Khajiit. It's not going to change that much in the game. You could just have 75% fire resist, and you're missing out on it for almost nothing, for 1 greater power of demoralize. And I just don't think that's worth it. The race tier list, really, it's not that different from classic Oblivion. The Breton is still king. High elves have actually gone down a notch, where I think before in classic you could argue high elves were better than Bretons due to their speed boost and that big magical pool, but I don't think that big magical pool is as required now. I think now it's going to be a little bit more willpower focused. All right, that's all I got. Thanks for watching.